Hi friends, I'm Sherry. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be planting some eggplant seedlings that I grew in my grow room from seed, as well as some dahlia tubers. Now, I know that I made out a map, a gardening map, for what I was going to be able to plant in my garden and where I was going to be planting it. And I was supposed to only grow enough seedlings that would fit in my garden. But as any gardener knows, it gets really scary when you think you're only going to be doing 6 eggplant, 2 of each variety, and you should only plant 2 seeds. Well, we all know that seeds aren't 100% germination, so I did double the amount and I ended up with double the amount of eggplant. So I'm going to throw spacing out the window. I'm not even going to think about how far apart each eggplant should be. I'm just going to take the eggplant seedlings that I have. I'm going to actually lay them in the raised beds where I plan on putting them. And then I'm going to show you how I plant them, as well as how I amend that soil where I'm planting those plants. So let's get planting. Have way too many for this bed. I'm only going to put 9 eggplants into this bed. 6 of them are the long purple. I believe I got those from Baker Creek. The other 3 are going to be Casper eggplant, so it's a white eggplant. Looks like your traditional eggplant size, but it's a bit smaller and it's white. In the other bed where I have onions and zinnias and carrots, I'm going to put string eggplant. I think that the string eggplant and the long purple ones are going to be really good for roasting. I've never tried either of these varieties before, so I like eggplant, and I think that the thinner they are, I think the better I will like them. So one of the things that I'm going to do right now is, now that I've laid out the Casper and the long purple eggplants, I'm going to start digging the holes. Well, I'm going to move away some of the wood chips that I already have on the bed from last year. And I'm going to dig the hole big enough, or bigger than I would normally dig it, to plant something, so that I can then put the seedling into the hole and then add some new compost in a way to amend that soil that this is going to be growing in. So I haven't amended this bed at all since last year. And so this is a great way to amend your beds if you already have mulch on top. So once I'm done planting everything in this bed, I'll add additional wood chips, just fresh wood chips, because we know that wood chips break down. And I want to make sure that they're holding in the moisture for these new plants. I'm then going to give them a really good drink and move on to the next bed. So let's get planting these, because we still have dahlias to plant. A little bit bummed this year a couple times throughout this growing season, which, you know, surprises me a little bit, because I put so much planning into this growing season. I grew a lot of food last year, but I also know that we don't have a lot of that food left over preserved or frozen, we've eaten it. So I knew that I had to grow more food this year in order to be able to have that food to last until the next harvest season or close to it. And so I put a lot of planning into it, right down to the fact that I actually wrote out on paper, I call it my blueprint of my garden, on what I was going to plant, where I was planting it, and how much. So that when I was starting my seeds in the basement, in the grow room, I would know how much to start so that I could actually fulfill that blueprint of my garden plan. And everything seemed to be going along great. And then I hit a snag with the tomatoes growing so fast. They actually germinated in 4 or 5 days, whereas last year I couldn't get those seeds to germinate for the life of me. I actually had to plant my seeds last year for tomatoes 3 times. This year, like I said, 4 to 5 days, they germinated, they popped up, and they started growing at the fastest rate I've ever seen the tomato plants grow, to the point where I had to try and slow them down. And I put them in a dog crate in my dining room to keep them safe from the cats. And what that did was it caused them to be weak seedlings because, one, I wasn't paying as much attention to them as I should for water, and 2, they weren't getting the sunlight that they needed. So when I planted them out here, I was devastated that as I was planting some of them, I was actually topping them. That's how weak they were. And I actually put a video out on, being worried about whether or not they were going to take. The other thing that has happened to me so far, and we're only like at the end of May, is the compost that we make on this property. For whatever reason, this year we used it like we do every year, but I used it in my tomatoes, and I had this morning 1,000 seedlings growing out of that compost all along my tomato seedlings that I purposely planted in my garden. So I had to spend the whole morning pulling out squash and tomato seedlings out of my garden that were volunteers. And sometimes I just think, I could have been doing so many other things in my garden other than, pulling out seedlings. But that's how we learn, right? So I'm trying to turn that experience into a learning experience. I know next year I will plant my tomato seedlings or plant my tomato seeds later because they like the environment that I'm providing them with the grow lights. They don't need to start on February 15th like I always start them. I'm going to start them later so that if they do take off like they did this year, I'll have started them later to account for that speed that they're growing. Likewise, for my compost, what I've decided to do is to get a thermometer. And I'm going to start keeping track of how hot my compost actually gets before I use it. Okay, so I planted 16 eggplants, 4 varieties. So there is shoestring, long purple, Casper, and tongue eggplant. So that's 16 of them. There was also a black Russian sunflower, which can grow to be about 12 feet tall. So I planted that, as well as 1 Kajari melon. Now I have already planted some Kajari melons up in my waist-high raised beds, but I decided to plant this one in the low raised beds to see which ones will do better. So I know that I am coming to the dahlia game late. I know that most people have already planted their dahlias and they probably have growth already. Depending on where you live, they could be, 3, 4, 5 feet tall, depending on the variety. So I know that I'm a little bit late, but a couple weeks ago I went to a garden store, and as I was walking in, I saw this amazingly beautiful plant, and was told that it was a dahlia, and it was white with purple and pink. Like, I'm not even sure if it's a purple or pink color. Just gorgeous. So I purchased it, I brought it home, planted it in my raised bed, and I'm going to show you a clip of the plant that caused me to buy some dahlia tubers. So after I bought that plant, and I'm sure you can understand why, because it is beautiful, I decided that I needed more of these on the property. And we actually have a section of our pool fence that is quite bare. There's nothing there. And we really just wanted to put something there so that it would give us a little bit more privacy from our neighbor's pool while we're using our pool. Now, we like our neighbors. It has nothing to do with that. We just wanted to have a little bit more privacy. Our property line, where it is and where their pool is fairly close. So we just wanted to have that extra privacy put in. So what I've done is I had stopped at a couple different garden stores, and I got purple dahlias, and 3 bulbs for $10. I'll just show you what they look like. Pretty purple ones. I also got ball dahlias. Oh, so these are, yeah, they just say Thomas Edison dahlias. These ones are an assortment of dahlias, 5 of them for $14. And I think it's because they're just kind of plain Jane. I mean, they have the really pretty petals, but essentially they're just solid colors, a little bit on the plain side. Then I decided that that wasn't enough, and I went online and found this place called Breck's. And they are a Canadian company, and they have a great website full of different types of bulbs and tubers, and you name it, they have it. And I was able to grab a few different varieties that they still had at 50% off. So I did that. And so some of the ones that I grabbed were Duet Dahlias, Jean Marie Dahlia, Bodacious Dahlia, and then I got some, what else did I get in here? I got some lilies. What was it called? I got a Zeba lily, as well as a lily tree and a Nettie's Pride lily. And so those haven't come yet, just the dahlias arrived, which is fine. Once the lilies arrive, I'll plant them. So I think my game plan for the dahlias is to lay them out in the area that I've chosen. Now, I've done a little bit of research on them. I will be honest, I've never grown dahlias before. So I've done a little bit of research, and I know that they should be 12 to 18 inches apart. I don't know that I'm gonna do them that far apart. I think I'll probably stick to the 12 inches. I might even go 10. We'll see. The space isn't really that big. I'm looking at it right here, and it's probably about 7-8 feet. So I really want to fit in as many of these different varieties as I can, so that when it grows, it's beautiful. Now, I do have a question for you. I live in Ontario, Canada, growing zone 5B, and I'm curious to know if any of you out there who live in zone 5B dig your tubers up, or do you just leave them in the ground? So I'm kind of torn on whether or not I should dig them up at the end of the season and store them in a cool, dry, dark place, or if I should leave them in the ground and just add another 4 inches of mulch to the top so that, you know, that they'll survive our winter here. So please leave me some comments below, let me know. So I think I'm going to get started. I'm going to start laying the tubers out on top of the soil. Once I see how I have them laid out and I like the way it's laid out, then I will dig them in to the soil. I'm going to make sure that each tuber is covered by about 2 to 3 inches. And then I'm going to cover the whole thing with wood chips. And I'm a little bit torn. I've read that if your tubers aren't actually growing greenery, then you shouldn't water them. Now, I did read on the back of one of these packages that said once you've planted them to water them. So I'm not really sure. I think what I might do is plant them, not water them for a few days, and see if I get any growth. I mean, it would be the same as, you know, leaving them in the box in a dry, cool place and warming up that place a couple weeks before planting them and having the growth start. So I might not water them in the fear that they'll rot before they grow. Okay, so let's get started. Okay guys, it looks like I actually have some growth on the ones from Brex, so I might have to water after all. So that's all my gardening for today. All of the seedlings have been, all the volunteer seedlings that are not wanted have been pulled. The eggplants and sunflower and Kajari melons have been planted, and all of my dahlias have been planted. I did notice that there was some growth on one of them, so I did give it a little bit of a sprinkle of water, just a slight drink, but I'll monitor that to see how the growth is going. I really appreciate all of you and all of the support that you're giving me, and I just want to say thank you for spending your time with me. Have a great day.